In today's video, we dive into one of the most pressing geopolitical questions of our time. What if Russia attacks NATO? What would the global consequences be, and how might the world react? Stay tuned as we explore this hypothetical scenario. Before we get into the details, let's first understand what NATO is. Founded in 1949, NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is a military alliance of 31 countries, including the US, UK, France, Germany, and many others. The central principle of NATO is collective defense, meaning an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. Article 5 of the NATO Treaty is what makes this alliance so powerful. It's only been invoked once, after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Russia and NATO have had a tense relationship for decades, dating back to the Cold War. After the fall of the Soviet Union, NATO expanded eastward, closer to Russia's borders, which Moscow sees as a threat. More recently, the 2014 annexation of Crimea, Russian military activity in Ukraine, and NATO's support for Eastern European countries have only worsened relations. So, what if Russia decides to launch a direct attack on a NATO member? The first thing to understand is that NATO countries are legally bound to respond. The collective defense mechanism would activate, and all member nations would be involved in defending the attacked country. In terms of military strength, NATO significantly outweighs Russia in terms of resources, manpower, and technology. However, Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal, and any conflict between the two could risk escalation into nuclear war. The impact of such a conflict wouldn't just be limited to Europe. It would affect the entire world. The global economy would be thrown into chaos, energy supplies would be disrupted, especially in Europe, and millions of people could be displaced. The United Nations would likely call for immediate ceasefires, and diplomatic channels would be pushed to their limits. Non-NATO countries like China and India would have to decide whether to remain neutral or take sides, potentially reshaping global alliances. However, before any of this happens, diplomacy is always an option. Both Russia and NATO have a lot to lose in a full-scale war, and diplomacy, though difficult, could prevent a catastrophic conflict. International organizations like the UN would likely work overtime to prevent any escalation. History shows that even the most intense tensions can be de-escalated through dialogue. The Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, is a reminder that diplomacy can work even when nuclear war seemed imminent.